The sound of laughter echoed through my Lagos mansion as I pushed my 10-year-old son Kemi's wheelchair through our front door, returning from his physiotherapy session. But the laughter wasn't mine. It was coming from our bedroom upstairs, mixed with a woman's voice I didn't recognize. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. My hands trembled as I quietly locked the wheelchair and climbed the marble staircase of our Ikoyi home. Each step felt heavier than the last. Through the crack in our bedroom door, I saw my husband Adebayo, the man I'd loved for 15 years, tangled in our silk sheets with a woman half my age. Her long Brazilian weave spilled across my pillow as she giggled at something he whispered. "Bayo, when will you tell that cripple wife of yours about us?" the woman purred, her Igbo accent thick with entitlement. "I'm tired of hiding, especially with that burden of a son she carries around." My breath caught in my throat. Burden? She was talking about Kemi, my beautiful boy who'd been paralyzed in a car accident 2 years ago. An accident that happened while Adebayo was supposed to be watching him but was instead at a business meeting that ran late. "Soon, Toma." Adebayo's voice was tender in a way he hadn't spoken to me in months. "After the holidays. I can't deal with Folake's drama right now, especially not with the boy's condition." I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. 15 years of marriage, and this is what my husband really thought of our son and me? The successful tech entrepreneur who'd built his empire with my family's initial investment was calling our disabled child a burden? "Promise me, baby," Chioma cooed. "I want to be your wife by next Christmas. I deserve better than being your side piece." "You'll get everything you want," Adebayo promised. "The house, the cars, the business." Folake signed a prenup that leaves her with almost nothing if I can prove abandonment or unfitness as a mother. My blood ran cold. Abandonment? Unfitness? I'd given up my own career as a financial analyst to care for Kemi full-time after his accident. I'd been the one sitting by his hospital bed for months while Adebayo jetted off to business conferences. I was the one who learned to use the wheelchair lift, who drove him to every therapy session, who held him during his nightmares. A crash from downstairs broke my thoughts. Kemi must have knocked something over trying to maneuver his wheelchair. I heard him calling for me, his young voice echoing through our 12-bedroom mansion. "Mama! Mama, I need help." I started toward the stairs, but Adebayo's next words stopped me cold. "Actually, forget waiting until after Christmas," he said, his tone suddenly decisive. "I want her and that boy out tonight. Christmas Eve or not. Call your lawyer friend and have the papers ready. Tell them I'm claiming she's mentally unfit to care for a disabled child, that she's been neglecting his needs." Chioma laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Perfect. I already picked out new furniture for his room. Maybe we can convert it into a home gym instead." My whole world tilted. Not only was my husband planning to divorce me and steal everything we'd built together, but he was going to do it on Christmas Eve. He was going to throw me and our paralyzed son out onto the streets based on lies, all for a woman who wanted to erase my child's very existence. I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. I had to get to Kemi before they heard him calling. I had to figure out how to protect us both. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard Adebayo's voice again. "And Chioma? Make sure you delete any evidence of us from your phone. If Folake finds out about the affair before the lawyer spins the story, it could complicate things. We need her to look like the guilty party." That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop even further. This wasn't just infidelity in marriage. This was a calculated plan. Adebayo had been orchestrating this domestic betrayal for months, maybe years. Every late business meeting, every time he'd criticized my parenting, every argument about Kemi's medical expenses, it had all been building to this moment. I crept down the stairs to find Kemi struggling to reach a glass of water that had fallen from the side table. His dark eyes, so much like mine, looked up at me with the kind of trust that broke my heart. "Mama, I couldn't reach it," he said softly. "Sorry for making noise." I knelt beside his wheelchair and cupped his face in my hands. "Never apologize for needing help, baby. Never." But even as I comforted my son, my mind was racing. If Adebayo thought he could destroy us and steal our life for his mistress, He had another thing coming. He didn't know what I was capable of when my child was threatened. And he definitely didn't know about the secret that made Kemi far more powerful than anyone realized. What Adebayo didn't know was that Kemi wasn't just my son, he was also the heir to something much bigger than our marriage, something that could destroy everything Adebayo had built. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. 2 hours later, I sat in my car outside our family lawyer's office in Victoria Island, Kemi beside me in his wheelchair, both of us staring at the rain hitting the windshield. The manila envelope in my lap contained copies of everything: bank statements, business documents, and most importantly, my grandmother's will that Adebayo had conveniently forgotten existed. Mama, why did Papa's friend come to the house with those papers? Kemi asked, his small hands folded in his lap. Why were you crying? I turned to face my son, this brave little boy who'd endured so much already. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that his father just served his mother with divorce papers on Christmas Eve? How do you tell him that the man who's supposed to protect him just called him a burden? Sometimes adults make very bad decisions, baby, I said carefully. But I promise you, no matter what happens, you and I will be okay. The lawyer's office was closed for the holiday, but I wasn't waiting until after Christmas to fight back. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed: Amara Okafor, the most ruthless family attorney in Lagos. She'd represented my sister during her own messy divorce 3 years ago. Folake. Amara's voice was surprised when she answered. Merry Christmas, sister. What's going on? Amara, I need your help. My husband just served me with divorce papers, and he's trying to claim I'm an unfit mother to steal everything from us. The silence stretched for several seconds before Amara spoke again, her tone sharp and professional. Where are you? Outside Benson and Associates on Victoria Island. Don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Folake? Don't sign anything, don't admit to anything, and don't leave Lagos. If he's moving this fast on Christmas Eve, he's been planning this for a long time. After I hung up, I called my younger brother Tund, who worked as an investigative journalist for The Guardian. If anyone could dig up dirt on Adebayo and his mistress, it was him. Sister, what's wrong? Tund answered immediately, the concern clear in his voice. I need you to investigate someone for me. Her name is Chioma something. She's having an affair with Adebayo. I need to know everything about her. Where she works, where she lives, who she really is. Folake, slow down. What's happening? I told him everything, catching them together, the cruel things they'd said about Kemi, the divorce papers, the prenup that supposedly left me with nothing. By the time I finished, Tund was silent for a long moment. Sister, there's something you need to know, he said finally. I've been investigating some financial irregularities at tech companies for a story I'm working on. Adebayo's company, TechFlow Solutions, has been flagged for some questionable transactions. Large amounts of money moving offshore, contracts with shell companies that don't seem to exist. My heart started pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband might be involved in money laundering or tax evasion. If I'm right, and if you can prove it, that prenup won't matter. The government will freeze all his assets while they investigate. This was the opening I needed. Adebayo thought he was so clever, planning to take everything from me while painting me as an unfit mother. But if he was involved in financial crimes, I could turn the tables completely. Tund, I need you to dig deeper. I need proof. I'll need access to his financial records, his business computers, anything that shows the money trail. I thought about our home office, where Adebayo kept his laptop and files. He was probably still upstairs with his mistress, too busy planning my destruction to notice if I grabbed what we needed. I can get you access, I said. But we have to move fast. Amara arrived exactly 20 minutes later, stepping out of her Range Rover like a warrior ready for battle. At 45, she was known for destroying cheating husbands in court, and her reputation preceded her everywhere she went. Show me the papers, she said without preamble, sliding into the passenger seat. I handed her the divorce documents, watching her dark eyes scan every line with the precision of a surgeon. She was wearing traditional Ankara print even on Christmas Eve, her head wrap perfectly tied despite the late hour. "This is interesting," she murmured after several minutes. "He's claiming you abandoned your parental duties and that you're emotionally unstable. But look at this. The papers were prepared 3 weeks ago. The date stamp is right here." She pointed to a small mark in the corner of the document. "He's been planning this for at least a month. That means he lied to the court about the timeline of your supposed mental breakdown. This is fraud, Folake. Criminal fraud." "There's more," I said, and told her about Tun's investigation into the financial irregularities. Amara's eyes lit up like a predator scenting blood. "If we can prove he's been hiding assets or moving money illegally, not only will that prenup be invalid, but he could face criminal charges. The courts don't look kindly on men who try to cheat their wives out of money while stealing from the government." She pulled out her own phone and made a quick call. "James? It's Amar. I need an emergency injunction filed tonight." "Yes, Christmas Eve. I have a client whose husband is trying to steal everything based on fraudulent claims. I'll have the paperwork to you within the hour." After she hung up, she turned to me with a smile that could have cut glass. "Here's what we're going to do. We're filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all marital assets until we can investigate his claims about your fitness as a mother. Meanwhile, your brother is going to help us gather evidence of financial crimes. And Folake, yes, we're going to destroy him. By the time I'm done, he'll wish he'd never heard your name." But even as hope flared in my chest, I knew we were racing against time. Adebayo had the advantage of preparation and money. All I had was the truth, a good lawyer, and one secret weapon he didn't know about. I looked at Kemi, who was dozing in his wheelchair despite everything happening around him. My son had no idea that he held the key to our salvation. Our family's land back in Ibadan, the property my grandmother had left specifically to the first male heir of her bloodline, was worth more than Adebayo's entire tech empire. The land that housed Nigeria's largest untapped oil reserve, according to the geological survey I'd kept hidden for 2 years. Don't miss what happens next. Like and share if you're rooting for Folake. At midnight on Christmas morning, I stood in Adebayo's home office with my brother Tund, carefully photographing every document we could find while Amara kept watch by the door. Upstairs, Adebayo and Chioma were still fast asleep, probably dreaming about their new life together, completely unaware that their world was about to crumble. "Sister, look at this," Tund whispered, pointing at the computer screen. "These bank transfers. He's been moving money to accounts in the Cayman Islands for over a year. Millions of naira, all from government contracts for rural internet infrastructure." I leaned closer, my heart racing as the numbers became clear. The contracts were supposed to bring internet access to remote villages across Nigeria, but instead, the money was being funneled offshore. My husband wasn't just a cheater, he was stealing from some of the poorest communities in our country. "There's more," Tund continued, scrolling through email threads. "Look at these messages between him and someone named Sihu. The timing matches when he started acting strange around the house." I read over his shoulder, each word making my stomach turn. The emails weren't just about money laundering, they were about me. Adebayo had been documenting every argument we'd had, every time I'd seemed tired or overwhelmed caring for Kemi, every moment of normal human emotion, and spinning it as evidence of my mental instability. "He's been building a case against you for 8 months, Tund said grimly. "Every fight, every tear, every time you raised your voice, he wrote it all down and twisted it to make you look unstable." But then I found something that made my blood boil even more. In a folder labeled Future Plans, there were architectural drawings for renovations to our house. Chioma hadn't been joking about converting Kemi's room. They'd already hired contractors to remove all the disability accommodations I'd installed and turn it into a master suite. They were planning to erase my son from his own home, I whispered, my hands shaking as I took photos of the plans. Before they even kicked us out, they were already designing our lives without us in them. Amara's voice cut through my anger. "Ladies, we need to move. I hear footsteps upstairs." We quickly copied the last of the financial files onto Tund's flash drive and crept back toward the kitchen. But as we reached the hallway, the lights flicked on, and Adebayo appeared at the top of the stairs in his silk pajamas. "Folake? What are you doing down there?" My mind raced. I couldn't let him know what we'd discovered, not yet. I needed more time to build our case. "Getting Kemi's medication," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. He was having trouble sleeping, and I remembered I left his pain pills in the kitchen. Adebayo frowned, clearly suspicious. "At midnight? And who are these people with you?" "My brother came to help move some of Kemi's things," I improvised. "Since you want us gone by tomorrow, I figured I should start packing his medical supplies." Something shifted in Adebayo's expression. A flicker of guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being reminded of his cruelty. "Fine. But make it quick. Chioma needs her sleep." The casual way he said her name, like she belonged in our house more than I did, sent a fresh wave of rage through me. But I kept my expression neutral until he disappeared back into what used to be our bedroom. Once we were safely outside, Amara gripped my shoulder with fierce determination. "We have enough to destroy him, Folake. The financial crimes alone will put him in prison. But there's something else we need to discuss." She pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. "I did some research on that prenup you signed. It has a clause that voids the entire agreement if either party commits a felony during the marriage. Adultery isn't a felony, but money laundering is." "What does that mean?" "It means you're entitled to half of everything, including his business. But more importantly, it means you can claim full custody of Kemi based on his criminal activity and character. No court will give a money launderer custody of a disabled child." I felt the first real spark of hope since this nightmare began. "So we can beat him?" "Sister, we're not just going to beat him," Tund added with a grin. "We're going to expose him in the national media. I've already got contacts at 3 major newspapers and 2 TV stations. By tomorrow evening, Adebayo Adelik will be the most hated man in Lagos." But Amara held up a warning hand. "There's something else you need to know. I had my private investigator look into Chioma while you were gathering evidence. Her full name is Chioma Okafor. Yes, same last name as me, but we're not related. More importantly, she's not the innocent victim she's pretending to be." She handed me a photograph that made my knees go weak. It was Chioma, but she was dressed in a police uniform, shaking hands with what looked like government officials. "She's a detective with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission," Amara explained. "The same agency that investigates money laundering and government corruption. Either she's the worst detective in Nigeria, or she's in on it," I finished, the pieces clicking into place. "She's been helping him hide the money." "Exactly. Which means this isn't just adultery and domestic betrayal, it's organized crime. They've been using her position to stay ahead of any investigations." I stared at the photo, thinking about all the cruel things Chioma had said about my son, about her plans to erase him from his own home. She wasn't just my husband's mistress, she was his criminal partner. They'd been planning to steal from the government, frame me as an unfit mother, and literally remove my disabled child from existence. "What do we do now?" I asked. Amara's smile was razor-sharp. "Now we call in some favors. I have contacts in the Attorney General's office who've been looking for a big case to make their careers. A corrupt EFCC detective and a tech CEO stealing millions from rural development funds? They'll love this. And I have a story to write," Tund added. "By tomorrow night, everyone in Nigeria will know exactly who Adebayo Adelik and Chioma Okafor really are." But even as we made our plans for revenge, I knew we were still missing something crucial. Taking down Adebayo and Chioma would feel good, but it wouldn't secure Kemi's future. For that, I needed to play my final card, the inheritance my grandmother had left us, the oil-rich land that could make my son one of the wealthiest children in Nigeria. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and I was going to give my son the gift of a lifetime, his birthright and his father's complete destruction. What do you think about Chioma being a corrupt detective? Comment your thoughts on this shocking twist. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Christmas morning arrived with the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop. I'd barely slept, curled up with Kemi in a hotel room in Victoria Island while our legal and media strategy unfolded across Lagos. But the calls weren't what I expected. "Mama, Why is Papa on TV? Kemi asked, pointing at the hotel room television where a news report was showing footage of our house surrounded by EFCC vehicles. I grabbed the remote and turned up the volume just as the reporter's voice filled the room. In a dramatic Christmas morning raid, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has arrested prominent tech CEO Adebayo and suspended Detective Chioma Okafor in connection with the alleged theft of over 200 million naira from government rural development contracts. My phone rang again. It was Amar. "Folake, we have a problem," she said without preamble. The EFCC moved faster than we expected. They arrested Adebayo and Chioma an hour ago, but now his family is claiming you tipped off the authorities to frame him. His mother is already on her way to Lagos with a team of lawyers. My heart sank. Adebayo's mother, Mama Adik, was a force of nature who'd never liked me. She'd always believed her precious son had married beneath his station, and now she'd see this as proof that I was trying to destroy her family. What does that mean for us? It means they're going to fight dirty. They'll claim you orchestrated this whole thing out of spite, that you planted evidence, that you're using Kemi as a pawn. We need to move quickly on the custody and asset protection. But before I could respond, there was a knock at my hotel room door. Through the peephole, I saw two men in expensive suits flanked by hotel security. "Mrs. Adelik? We're here on behalf of the Adelik family. We need to speak with you about your son's welfare." I kept the chain lock in place and spoke through the crack. "Who are you?" "We're from Child Protective Services. We've received reports that you may be using your disabled child in a scheme to extort money from his father's family." My blood ran cold. They'd turned my own strategy against me, claiming that I was exploiting Kemi's condition for financial gain. It was brilliant and evil in equal measure. "You can't take him without a court order," I said, my voice shaking. "Actually, we can. In cases where a child's welfare is in immediate danger, we have emergency powers. Please open the door." I looked at Kemi, who was watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. I couldn't let them take him, but I also couldn't run. If I fled with my son, it would only prove their point about me being unstable. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Adelik, this is Chief Justice Adebayo Ogundimu. Please call me immediately. Your grandmother mentioned you might need help someday." My grandmother? She'd been dead for 5 years. How could she have? Then I remembered. The will. The land. The secret she'd made me promise to keep until Kemi was old enough to understand his inheritance. But she'd also mentioned someone, a family friend in high places who would help protect what was rightfully ours. I quickly dialed the number while the men outside continued knocking. "Chief Justice Ogundimu? This is Folake Adelik. I think my grandmother, Mama Yijide Adebayo, told you about me?" Folake, your grandmother was my dearest friend. I've been following your situation through mutual contacts. Tell me, do you still have the documents she left you? The ones about the land in Ibadan?" "Yes, sir. But those documents make your son one of the most valuable heirs in Nigeria. The oil survey results came in last month. That land contains reserves worth over 50 billion naira. But more importantly right now, those documents also prove that your family has been protecting government interests for generations. Your great-grandfather was instrumental in Nigeria's independence, and your grandmother continued that legacy." I felt dizzy. 50 billion naira? My son was sitting in a hotel wheelchair, scared and confused, and he was potentially one of the richest children in the country? "Sir, what does that mean for us today? Child Services is at my door trying to take Kemi. It means you have protection at the highest levels of government. Your son isn't just a disabled child. He's the heir to one of Nigeria's most patriotic families. Give me 5 minutes." The knocking stopped abruptly. I heard muffled voices in the hallway, then footsteps walking away. My phone rang again. This time it was the hotel manager. "Mrs. Adelk, I apologize for the disturbance. There was some confusion with the gentleman who came to see you. They've been asked to leave the premises." 10 minutes later, there was another knock, but this time it was Amara with 2 men in traditional Agbada robes. "Folake, I want you to meet Senator Adebayo Fashola and Commissioner Ibrahim Yakubu. They're here about your son's inheritance." Senator Fashola, a distinguished man in his 60s, knelt down to Kemi's wheelchair level. "Young man, do you know what your great-great-grandmother did for this country?" Kemi shook his head, still bewildered by everything happening around him. "She helped negotiate the treaties that gave us our independence. She protected our land from foreign oil companies who wanted to steal it. And she made sure that one day her family would have the power to protect our people from those who would rob them." He stood and looked at me. "Mrs. Adebayo, your husband and his accomplice weren't just stealing from random government contracts. They were targeting the same rural development programs that your family has been protecting for generations. This isn't just about your marriage, it's about preserving your family's legacy of fighting corruption." Commissioner Yakubu added, "The president himself has ordered full protection for you and your son while this investigation continues. Your husband chose the wrong family to betray." But even as relief flooded through me, I realized the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about domestic betrayal or infidelity in marriage anymore. Adebayo had unknowingly declared war on one of Nigeria's founding families, and now the full weight of the government was about to crush him. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We have your husband's phone records. He's been planning this for 2 years, not 8 months. There's something else you need to know about why he really wanted to get rid of you and Kemi." The message included a single photo attachment, a geological survey of our family land, dated 3 years ago. Someone had known about the oil reserves long before I did, and they'd been positioning themselves to steal not just Adebayo's business, but my son's entire inheritance. Someone who was still out there, still planning, still dangerous. Who do you think is behind this bigger conspiracy? Like if you're shocked by these revelations. 3 days after Christmas, I sat in the VIP section of the Federal High Court in Ikoyi, watching as Adebayo was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked haggard and defeated, nothing like the confident man who'd planned to throw his disabled son onto the streets. But what shocked me more was seeing Chioma at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit, her expensive Brazilian weave replaced by a simple headscarf. "Mama, why does Papa look so sad?" Kemi whispered beside me, his small hand finding mine. I squeezed it gently. "Sometimes people make very bad choices, baby. And when they do, they have to face the consequences." But even as I tried to comfort my son, my mind was racing with questions from the mysterious text I'd received. Who else knew about the oil reserves? Who had been pulling strings behind this entire scheme? The answer came sooner than I expected. "All rise for the Honorable Justice Adebayo Ogundimu," the bailiff announced. The same Chief Justice who'd helped me 3 days ago entered the courtroom, his expression stern as he took his seat. But what caught my attention was the woman in the gallery behind Adebayo, an elegant lady in her 50s wearing traditional Yoruba dress, her jewelry obviously expensive. She was watching the proceedings with intense interest, occasionally taking notes. "Who is that woman?" I whispered to Amara. Amara followed my gaze and frowned. "I don't know, but she's been at every hearing. Let me find out." While Justice Ogundimu read the charges against Adebayo and Chioma, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the government, falsifying documents, and now child endangerment, Amara discreetly made some phone calls. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had bank records, email evidence, testimony from government officials who'd been bribed, and even recorded phone conversations between Adebayo and Chioma planning how to frame me as an unfit mother. But what made my stomach turn was hearing the prosecutor read aloud some of the things they'd said about Kemi. The defendants discussed converting the victim child's specially adapted bedroom into a love nest, removing all medical equipment and accessibility features. In recorded conversations, they referred to the 10-year-old disabled child as baggage, and discussed ways to permanently separate him from his mother through false psychiatric evaluations. I felt Kemi stiffen beside me. He was old enough to understand that his father had wanted to hurt him, to erase him from their new life. The betrayal went beyond anything I'd imagined. This was child abuse disguised as domestic betrayal. When the judge asked Adebayo to enter his plea, something unexpected happened. Instead of pleading not guilty as his lawyers had indicated, he stood up and looked directly at me. "Your Honor, I want to change my plea. I plead guilty to all charges." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Even his own lawyers looked shocked. Chioma stared at him in horror, clearly realizing he was about to throw her under the bus to save himself. Furthermore, Adebayo continued, his voice cracking, I want to provide testimony about other individuals who were involved in this conspiracy, individuals who approached me 2 years ago with information about my wife's family land and convinced me that the only way to access that wealth was to eliminate her and my son from the equation. My heart stopped. Other individuals. The mysterious text had been right. This conspiracy went deeper than just adultery and financial fraud. Justice Ogundamu leaned forward. Mr. Adelik, are you saying you were recruited into this scheme by outside parties? Yes, Your Honor. I was contacted by representatives of a foreign oil company who had conducted illegal geological surveys on private Nigerian land. They knew about the oil reserves before anyone else, and they needed someone with legal access to that land through marriage. The elegant woman in the gallery suddenly stood up and began walking toward the exit, but 2 EFCC agents who'd been stationed near the doors blocked her path. Justice Ogundamu nodded to them, and they escorted her back to her seat. The woman who recruited me is in this courtroom today, Adebayo said, pointing directly at her. Her name is Mrs. Victoria Emeka, and she represents Titan Oil Corporation, a shell company for Chinese petroleum interests. They've been trying to steal Nigerian oil reserves for years by corrupting local families and manipulating inheritance laws. Everything clicked into place. This hadn't been about Adebayo falling out of love with me or even about him wanting to be with Chioma. This had been an elaborate 2-year plan to steal my son's inheritance by destroying our family from within. Victoria Emeka rose from her seat, her composure finally cracking. Your Honor, this man is clearly lying to reduce his sentence. I'm here as a concerned citizen observing these proceedings. Then you won't mind explaining to this court how you knew to attend every hearing related to this case, Justice Ogundamu replied coldly, or why your hotel registration shows you've been in Lagos for 6 months, well before these charges were filed. Amara leaned over to me, her eyes bright with vindication. Folake, do you understand what this means? Your husband didn't just betray you for another woman. He betrayed his country for foreign money. This isn't domestic betrayal anymore, it's treason. But as Victoria Emeka was arrested and handcuffed alongside Chioma, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. If a foreign oil company had been planning this for 2 years, conducting illegal surveys and corrupting government officials, how many other Nigerian families were they targeting? How many other children's inheritances were they trying to steal? Your Honor, I found myself standing up, my voice carrying across the silent courtroom. I request permission to speak. Justice Ogundamu nodded. Mrs. Adelk, you may approach the bench. As I walked forward, leaving Kemi with Amara, I felt the weight of not just my own family's legacy, but the responsibility to protect other Nigerian children from predators like Victoria Emeka. Your Honor, I want to volunteer my family's resources to help investigate how many other families have been targeted by these foreign interests. My son may be disabled, but he's also the heir to land that belongs to Nigeria, not to Chinese oil companies. I want to make sure no other child loses their birthright the way they tried to steal his. Justice Ogundamu smiled, the first genuine expression of warmth I'd seen from him. Mrs. Adelik, your grandmother would be very proud of you today. But as I returned to my seat, I noticed something that made my victory feel incomplete. Chioma was staring at me with such hatred that it made my skin crawl. Even in handcuffs, even facing years in prison, she looked like she was still planning something. That night, as I tucked Kemi into bed in our hotel suite, now guarded by government security, I found a note that had been slipped under our door. This isn't over. Your son will never be safe as long as he owns what should belong to others. The note wasn't signed, but I knew it wasn't from Victoria Emeka or Chioma. They were both in federal custody. Someone else was still out there, still planning, still threatening my child. Someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes Adebayo had made. Don't miss the next chapter to see what happens when the real enemy reveals themselves. What do you think the note means? 1 week later, I was reviewing the final divorce settlement papers in Amara's office when my phone rang with news that changed everything. It was Senator Fashola, and his voice was urgent. Folake, We have a serious problem. Victoria Emeka escaped from federal custody last night. She killed 2 guards and disappeared with help from the inside. We believe she's still in Lagos and she's desperate. My blood ran cold. What does that mean for Kemi and me? It means you're both in immediate danger. This woman has billions of dollars at stake and nothing left to lose. We're moving you to a secure location immediately. But even as he spoke, I heard something that made my heart stop. The sound of Kemi's wheelchair moving across the marble floor of Amara's office, followed by a woman's voice I recognized. Hello, Folake. We meet again. I spun around to find Victoria Emeka standing behind Kemi's wheelchair, one manicured hand resting on my son's shoulder. She looked different from the elegant woman in court. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by all black, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone with nothing left to lose. How did you get in here? Amara demanded, reaching for her phone. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Victoria said calmly. You see, I've spent 2 years learning everything about this family. I know that this building has exactly 17 security cameras, 4 emergency exits, and one very devoted mother who will do anything to protect her disabled son. My hands were shaking as I slowly placed my phone on Amara's desk. What do you want? What I've always wanted. That land your son inherited is sitting on top of 50 billion naira worth of oil, and my employers have already invested heavily in extraction equipment. We can't simply walk away because of a few inconvenient legal proceedings. She pulled out what looked like legal documents from her jacket. These are adoption papers transferring custody of Kemi to a loving family in China who specialize in caring for disabled children. Once he's out of Nigeria, the inheritance laws become much more flexible. You can't just kidnap my son and steal his birthright, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. My dear Folake, I've been planning this for 3 years. Do you really think your husband's betrayal was the only option I had? Adebayo was just the most convenient tool, but men are so easily replaced. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Standing behind Victoria were 2 other people I recognized, Dr. Adiz Nwosu, Kemi's physiotherapist, and Mr. Chukwu, the driver I'd hired to take us to medical appointments. You've been watching us this whole time, I whispered. Every therapy session, every doctor's visit, every moment of weakness when you thought about giving up caring for a disabled child, Dr. Nwosu said, her voice completely different from the compassionate woman I'd trusted with my son's care. We documented everything, building a case for why Kemi would be better off with a family who could afford proper medical care. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Adebayo had done. These people had been in my home, had seen Kemi at his most vulnerable moments, had pretended to care about his recovery while planning to steal him away. The beauty of it, Victoria continued, is that everyone will believe it's in Kemi's best interest. A poor single mother struggling to care for a disabled child versus a wealthy international family with unlimited resources for his medical needs. Which option sounds more appealing to a custody judge? But as she spoke, I noticed something she didn't. Kemi's hand was moving slowly toward the emergency button on his wheelchair, the one that connected directly to the police station. We'd installed it after his accident in case he ever needed help when I wasn't around. I needed to keep her talking, to give him time. You killed those guards, I said. The police will find you. The police are looking for a desperate fugitive, Victoria smiled. They're not looking for Mrs. Chenwei, a respected Chinese businesswoman who's here to adopt a needy child. I have a complete new identity, a private jet fueled and waiting, and diplomatic immunity. That's when Amara surprised everyone. Instead of staying quiet, she stood up and walked calmly to her office safe. Victoria, there's something you should know before you make the biggest mistake of your life. I'm listening. Amara pulled out a thick folder and placed it on her desk. This contains evidence of every illegal geological survey your company conducted on Nigerian soil, every government official you bribed, every law you broke trying to steal oil reserves that belong to Nigerian children. Victoria's confidence flickered for just a moment. That evidence is irrelevant if the child and the land ownership are both gone. Normally, but you see, Kemi isn't the only heir to that land. My heart stopped. What was Amara talking about? According to the original land grant from the colonial period, which I had our researchers examine very carefully, ownership passes to the bloodline of Yejide Adebayo and all her descendants. Not just male heirs. Folake, your grandmother had 3 children, not just your father. The folder hit the desk with a thud. Your father had a younger sister who moved to America in the 1970s. She has 2 sons who are now successful lawyers in New York. Even if something happened to Kemi, the land would pass to them, and they have the full protection of both the American and Nigerian governments. Victoria's face went pale. That's impossible. We researched the bloodline extensively. You researched the male bloodline because your culture doesn't recognize women's inheritance rights. But this is Nigeria, and this land was granted under traditional law that includes all descendants. Killing or kidnapping Kemi won't get you the oil, Victoria. It will just add murder to your list of crimes. I saw the exact moment when Victoria realized her entire plan was collapsing. 2 years of preparation, millions of dollars invested, and she'd been defeated by something as simple as not understanding Nigerian family law. But that's also when she became most dangerous. If I can't have the oil, she said, pulling out a gun, then no one can. I'll make sure this family's legacy dies with their precious heir. That's when Kemi proved he was stronger than anyone knew. Instead of cowering in fear, my 10-year-old son looked Victoria straight in the eyes and said, "My mama taught me that bullies always lose in the end. You're just another bully." Then he pressed the emergency button. Within seconds, the building's security system activated, the doors locked automatically, and police sirens filled the air outside. Victoria had walked into a trap, but she still had a gun pointed at my son. The standoff that followed would determine whether Kemi lived to claim his inheritance, or whether Victoria's desperation would destroy everything my family had built. What do you think happens in this dangerous standoff? Share this story if you're on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-pounding drama. The standoff lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Victoria's hand was shaking as she pointed the gun at Kemi, sweat beading on her forehead as police sirens grew louder outside. But my son, my brave little boy, sat calmly in his wheelchair and did something that changed everything. He started laughing. "What's so funny?" Victoria demanded, her voice cracking with stress. "You remind me of the bad lady in the wheelchair stories Mama reads to me," Kemi said, his voice clear and unafraid. "She always thinks she's so smart, but she never wins because she forgets that good people have friends." That's when the office door burst open, and it wasn't just police officers who rushed in, it was Senator Fashola, Chief Justice Ogundamu, and someone I'd never seen before. A tall, elegant woman in traditional Yoruba attire who carried herself like royalty. "Victoria Emeka," the woman said in accented English, "I am Ambassador Sarah Adebayo, and I represent both the Chinese and Nigerian governments in matters of international oil rights. You are hereby under arrest for crimes against both our nations." Victoria's face went white. "Ambassador Adebayo? But you're supposed to be on our side. Your company hired us." "My maiden name is Chin, but I married into the Adebayo family 20 years ago," the ambassador said coldly. "That makes me Kemi's great-aunt and the person responsible for protecting our family's interests in international law. The company that hired you was a rogue operation that has been under investigation by both governments for months." The gun fell from Victoria's hands as the full scope of her failure became clear. She'd been working for criminals who'd been using her, while the legitimate Chinese government had been working with Nigeria to protect families like ours from exploitation. As the police handcuffed Victoria and her accomplices, Ambassador Adebayo knelt down to Kemi's wheelchair level, just as Senator Fashola had done weeks earlier. "Hello, nephew," she said softly. "Your great-grandmother wrote to me about you before she died. She said you would be the one to protect our family's legacy when the time came." Kemi's eyes went wide. "I have a great-aunt in China? You have family all over the world, little one. And all of us are very proud of how brave you've been." But even as relief flooded through me, I realized this ordeal had revealed something profound about my son. Despite everything that had happened, his father's betrayal, strangers trying to kidnap him, guns pointed at him, Kemi had never lost his courage or his faith that good people would help him. Later that evening, as we finally returned to our own house for the first time since Christmas Eve, Kemi wheeled himself around the rooms that Adebayo and Chioma had planned to take from him. The contractor's plans were gone, the accessibility features remained, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like home again. "Mama," Kemi said as I tucked him into his own bed, "Papa wasn't a very good daddy, was he?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Your papa made some very bad choices, baby. But that doesn't mean he didn't love you. Sometimes people get confused about what's really important." "I'm glad he's gone," Kemi said simply. "He made you cry too much." The honesty in his voice broke my heart. My son had been protecting me just as much as I'd been protecting him, and he'd seen more of his father's cruelty than I'd realized. "Kemi, there's something I need to tell you about your inheritance," I said. "That land your great-great-grandmother left you? It's worth a lot of money. Enough money to make sure you never have to worry about anything for the rest of your life." He thought about this for a moment. "Can we use some of it to help other kids like me? Kids whose papas aren't nice to them?" And that's when I knew that despite everything he'd been through, my son's heart was still pure. He wanted to use his wealth to help others, not just to secure his own future. "We can do whatever you want with it, baby. It's yours. Then I want to build a place where kids in wheelchairs can play and learn, and where mamas who are sad can come to feel better. Can we do that?" I kissed his forehead, overwhelmed with pride. "We can do that." The next morning brought news that tied up the final loose ends of our ordeal. Adebayo had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for his crimes. Chioma received 12 years, and her career in law enforcement was finished forever. Victoria Emeka was being extradited to face additional charges in China, where her actions had embarrassed the government and threatened international relations. But the most satisfying news came from Tund, who'd spent weeks investigating the full scope of the conspiracy. "Sister, you're not going to believe this," he said over breakfast, showing me his laptop screen. "Remember how Victoria claimed she'd been planning this for 3 years? Well, it turns out she approached 12 different Nigerian families with oil-rich land. Yours was just the most successful attempt. What happened to the other families? That's the beautiful part. Your case exposed the entire operation. The government is now reviewing all land ownership disputes from the past 5 years, and they've discovered at least 30 families who had their inheritances stolen through similar schemes. All of those cases are being reopened." I stared at the screen, seeing photos of other families, other children, who'd been victims of the same predators who'd targeted us. So Kemi's courage didn't just save us. It saved all of them. Exactly. And get this. The president is using your case as the foundation for new laws protecting traditional land rights from foreign exploitation. They're calling it the Kemi Protection Act. My son, who Adebayo had called a burden, who Chioma had wanted to erase, who Victoria had tried to kidnap, was now the inspiration for laws that would protect Nigerian children for generations to come. That afternoon, as Kemi played in the garden behind our house, the same garden where Adebayo had once complained about the cost of building wheelchair ramps, I received a call that brought everything full circle. "Mrs. Adelik? This is Dr. Emeka Okafor from the University College Hospital. I know this might sound unusual, but I wanted to let you know that your son's case has inspired a new medical research program." "What kind of program?" "We've received funding to study advanced rehabilitation techniques for children with spinal injuries. The program is being funded by several international donors who heard about Kemi's story. If successful, it could help thousands of children regain mobility." I watched my son as he maneuvered his wheelchair around the garden, laughing as he chased butterflies. He might never walk again, but he'd already changed more lives than most people ever would. "Doctor, would you be interested in having Kemi participate in the research? Not as a patient, but as an advisor? I think he has some insights about what children like him really need." "Mrs. Adelik, I was hoping you'd ask." But even as I planned Kemi's bright future, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story wasn't quite finished. That night, as I was putting him to bed, he asked me a question that reminded me we still had one more chapter to write. "Mama, When I grow up and get married, how will I know if my wife really loves me, or if she just wants my money like that lady wanted Papa's business? It was a question that would shape how I raised him, how I prepared him for a future where his wealth would make him a target but his character would make him a leader. The answer would determine not just Kemi's happiness, but the legacy of everything we'd fought to protect. What advice do you think Folake should give her son? Comment below with your thoughts on love versus money. 6 months later, I stood in the grand ballroom of the Oriental Hotel in Lagos, watching as dignitaries from across Africa gathered to celebrate the opening of the Kemi Foundation for Children's Rights. My son, now 11 and more confident than ever, sat at the head table in his custom wheelchair, wearing traditional Yoruba agbada and speaking to reporters about his vision for helping other children. But the most meaningful moment came when an unexpected guest arrived. Folake. I turned to see Adebayo standing behind me, flanked by 2 prison guards. He'd been granted a special release to attend the foundation launch at Kemi's request. He looked older, thinner, his once proud demeanor replaced by genuine humility. "Thank you for letting me come," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve to be here." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulative man who tried to destroy us. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. "Kemi wanted you here," I said simply. "This is his day, not mine." Adebayo nodded and walked slowly toward our son. The ballroom fell silent as guests noticed the interaction, but Kemi simply looked up at his father with calm eyes. "Hello, Papa." "Hello, my son." Adebayo's voice cracked as he knelt beside the wheelchair. "I came to apologize. Not just for what I did to you and your mama, but for forgetting that being your father was the most important job I ever had." What happened next surprised everyone. Kemi reached out and took his father's hand. "I forgive you, Papa. Mama taught me that holding anger just makes your heart heavy, and I want my heart to be light so I can help other kids." There wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. Even the hardened journalists were wiping away tears as they watched my son demonstrate a maturity that grown men twice his age couldn't match. "Kemi," Adebayo said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know I can't be your papa anymore the way I should have been. But can I be your friend? Can I earn the right to be proud of you again?" "You never stopped being my papa," Kemi replied. "You just forgot how to be a good one for a while. But people can change, right, Mama?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for since the day I'd caught Adebayo with his mistress. The moment when I had to choose between the safety of holding on to anger and the risk of allowing healing. "People can change," I agreed, "but they have to prove it with actions, not just words." Adebayo nodded. "I've spent 6 months in prison thinking about how to prove that I understand what I destroyed. I know I can never have my family back, but I want to spend the rest of my life making sure other families don't go through what we did." He pulled out a folder of legal documents. "I've donated my entire remaining fortune to the foundation, everything I didn't steal, everything the government didn't seize. It's not enough to undo the harm I caused, but it's a start." I took the documents, scanning through them with amazement. It wasn't just money. He'd signed over his business connections, his intellectual property rights, even his future earning potential from any work he did after his release from prison. "Bayo," I said, using his nickname for the first time in months, This is everything you have left." "It belongs to Kemi anyway," he said simply. "I should have given it to him from the beginning instead of trying to take what was his." But the real surprise came from Kemi himself. "Papa, I want to offer you a job." Everyone in the ballroom held their breath. A job? What could an 11-year-old possibly offer his disgraced father? "The foundation needs someone who understands how bad people think, so we can protect other families from them. Someone who knows what it's like to make terrible mistakes and want to fix them. Would you help us do that?" Adebayo stared at his son in wonder. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me," Kemi corrected. "But first you have to promise that you'll never lie to me again, and you'll never hurt Mama again, and you'll help me make sure no other kids get betrayed by people who are supposed to love them." "I promise," Adebayo whispered. "I promise on your great-grandmother's memory and on my own soul." Later that evening, after the guests had left and the cameras had stopped rolling, I found myself alone with Kemi in the hotel's quiet garden. The Lagos skyline sparkled beyond the palm trees, and for the first time in almost a year, I felt genuine peace. "Mama, did I do the right thing?" Kemi asked, his young voice carrying the weight of wisdom beyond his years. "Giving Papa another chance?" I thought about everything we'd been through, the betrayal, the fear, the legal battles, the threats. I thought about the strength it had taken for both of us to survive, and the even greater strength it would take to truly heal. "Baby, forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves another chance," I said finally. "It's about whether holding on to anger is helping you become the person you want to be. Today, you chose to be someone who breaks cycles instead of continuing them." "What does that mean?" "It means that instead of growing up angry and suspicious because your papa hurt us, you chose to grow up believing that people can change and do better. That choice will affect every relationship you have for the rest of your life." Kemi nodded thoughtfully. "So when I get married someday, I'll be able to love someone without being scared they'll leave me?" The question pierced my heart because it revealed how much the betrayal had affected him, despite his brave facade. "That's the goal, baby. But it won't be easy. Your wealth will attract people who want to use you, just like it attracted the people who tried to hurt us. Then how will I know who really loves me?" I pulled his wheelchair closer to my chair and took his hands in mine. "The same way I knew your papa had stopped loving me, and the same way I know now that he's genuinely sorry. You watch what people do when they think nobody's looking. You pay attention to how they treat people who can't help them. And most importantly, you trust your heart, but you protect it with your mind. Will you teach me how to do that? Every single day, until you don't need me to anymore." As we sat in the garden, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I realized that our story wasn't really about revenge or even justice. It was about transformation. How betrayal and pain could either destroy a family or forge it into something stronger than before. Kemi had chosen strength. Adebayo had chosen redemption. And I had chosen to believe that love, real love, was still possible after the deepest betrayal. But as we prepared to leave the hotel, I received a text message that reminded me that not all stories have clean endings. "Congratulations on your foundation launch. Some of us are watching and learning. Next time will be different." The number was blocked, but the message was clear. Victoria Emeka might be in prison, but the threat to oil-rich Nigerian families hadn't ended with our victory. Someone else was out there, studying our methods, preparing for the next attempt. The question was, would Kemi's generation be ready for them? Don't miss the powerful conclusion. What do you think this threatening message means for the family's future? 1 year later, I stood in our family's ancestral village in Ibadan, watching as the first oil derrick rose from land that had belonged to our family for generations. But this wasn't the exploitation Victoria Emeka had planned. This was something entirely different. Kemi, now 12 and even more determined than before, had convinced the government to create Nigeria's first community-owned oil extraction program. Instead of foreign companies stealing our resources, Nigerian engineers were training local workers, and every naira of profit would go directly to education and healthcare for rural communities. "Mama, look!" Kemi called from his wheelchair, pointing to a group of children from the village who were learning to operate the new computers he'd donated to their school. "They're already smarter than me with technology." I laughed, watching my son's joy as he shared his resources with others. The threatening message from months ago had led to increased security around our family, but it had also led to something more powerful, a network of protected families across Africa who were working together to prevent future exploitation. But our celebration was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Adebayo? A young woman in business attire approached us, flanked by security guards. "My name is Dr. Amina Hassan, and I represent a consortium of African governments. We need to speak with you about your son's inheritance." My blood ran cold. Not again. Not when we'd finally found peace. "What about his inheritance?" I asked, instinctively moving closer to Kemi's wheelchair. "We have intelligence that suggests the threats against your family are part of a larger pattern. Oil-rich families across the continent have been targeted by what we believe is an international crime syndicate. Your son's case became famous enough that it may have painted a target on other families." She handed me a tablet displaying a map of Africa with red dots scattered across multiple countries. Each dot represents a family that has lost their land rights under suspicious circumstances in the past 5 years. The pattern suggests coordinated attacks designed to destabilize African resource ownership. I stared at the map in horror. Dozens of families, hundreds of children, all victims of the same type of conspiracy that had nearly destroyed us. What does this have to do with Kemi? Your son has become a symbol of successful resistance. Other families look to his example for hope. But that also makes him the syndicate's highest priority target. They need to destroy what he represents in order to continue their operations. Kemi, who had been listening quietly, wheeled his chair closer to us. Dr. Hassan, are you asking us to hide, or are you asking us to fight? The doctor looked surprised by the directness of his question. What do you mean? I mean, if bad people are hurting other families like they tried to hurt us, then hiding won't stop them. It will just make them braver. But if we fight back, we might be able to protect everyone. Dr. Hassan exchanged glances with her security team. Young man, fighting back could put you in more danger than you've ever faced. These people have unlimited resources and no conscience. So did the people who tried to hurt us before, Kemi replied calmly. But they lost because they forgot that Nigerian children have something they don't understand. What's that? We have ancestors who fought for our freedom, and we have families who love us more than money. Those things make us stronger than any syndicate. I felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. My son was right, but he was also talking about walking directly into danger that could cost us everything we'd fought to protect. Kemi, baby, maybe we should think about this? Mama, he interrupted gently, remember what you taught me about breaking cycles instead of continuing them? If we don't help other families now, then their children will grow up the same way I almost did, scared, angry, and alone. That's when I realized my son had grown beyond even my expectations. He wasn't just thinking about his own safety or even our family's future. He was thinking about children he'd never met, in countries he'd never visited, who were facing the same threats we'd survived. Dr. Hassan, I said finally, what exactly are you proposing? We want to create an international task force to identify and protect resource-rich African families before they can be exploited. Your son's foundation has already proven that community-based resource management works. We want to scale that model across the continent. And the danger to us? Significant. You'd be taking on enemies with more power and fewer scruples than anything you faced with Victoria Emeka. But you'd also have the backing of multiple governments and the most advanced security available. Kemi took my hand. Mama, when I was scared in the hotel that day, you didn't run away from the bad lady. You stayed and fought to protect me. Now there are other kids who need someone to stay and fight for them. I looked at my son, this remarkable boy who had transformed personal trauma into global activism, who had turned his father's betrayal into a mission of redemption, who had converted his disability into a platform for empowering others. Are you sure about this, baby? Once we say yes, there's no going back to our quiet life. I've never been more sure of anything, he said. Besides, our life was never really quiet. We just didn't know how many other families needed our help. Dr. Hassan smiled. Then you'll do it? I looked around at the oil derrick rising from our ancestral land, at the village children learning on computers my son had provided, at the security guards who protected us because his story had inspired governmental action. Our personal battle had already become something larger than ourselves. We'll do it, I said. But on one condition. What's that? Every family we help has to agree to help others in turn. If we're going to break this cycle of exploitation, it has to be permanent. Agreed. As Dr. Hassan's team began outlining their plans for the international task force, I caught Kemi staring thoughtfully at the horizon where the sun was setting over the land that had caused us so much pain and so much triumph. What are you thinking about, baby? I was thinking about Papa, he said quietly. He's been working really hard at the foundation, helping us identify families who might be in danger. I think he's finally learning how to be the kind of father great-grandmother would have wanted him to be. Are you proud of him? I'm proud that he chose to change. And I'm proud that we chose to let him. But as we prepared to leave for Lagos the next morning, I found a note in my hotel room that reminded me the stakes of our new mission were higher than ever. Your son's crusade ends now. Some cycles are meant to continue. Choose his safety over your principles, or lose everything. This time, the note was signed with a symbol I didn't recognize, a stylized oil drop surrounded by Chinese characters. The consortium Victoria Emeka had claimed to represent was still out there, still planning, and now they knew we weren't backing down. The real war was just beginning. Share this story if you believe in fighting for what's right. What do you think the Chinese symbol means? 3 years later, I stood on the stage of the United Nations headquarters in New York, watching as my 15-year-old son addressed the General Assembly about international resource protection. Kemi had grown taller, his voice had deepened, but his determination to protect African children from exploitation burned brighter than ever. Honorable delegates, he spoke into the microphone with confidence that would have made his great-grandmother proud. 3 years ago, my family was targeted by international criminals who wanted to steal our inheritance and silence our voices. Today, I'm here to tell you that their plan failed, not just for us, but for families across Africa who have found strength in unity. The applause that followed was thunderous. In the audience, I could see representatives from 43 African nations, all of whom had signed onto the Kemi protection protocols that now safeguarded resource-rich families across the continent. But the most meaningful presence in the room was Adebayo, who sat in the family section wearing a simple suit instead of his former expensive attire. 3 years of genuine redemption work had transformed him from the arrogant man who'd betrayed us into someone I barely recognized, humble, dedicated, and completely focused on protecting the son he'd once planned to abandon. The statistics speak for themselves, Kemi continued. Since the implementation of the protection protocols, international theft of African family resources has decreased by 78%. More importantly, over 12,000 children now have secure access to their ancestral inheritances, and their families are using those resources to build schools, hospitals, and businesses that benefit entire communities. As he spoke, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The threatening notes had never stopped coming, but they'd grown less frequent as our network of protected families expanded. The Chinese syndicate Victoria Emeka had been exposed and dismantled through coordinated international law enforcement. Most importantly, the cycle of exploitation that had threatened Kemi's generation was finally being broken. But the most profound change was in my son himself. The frightened 10-year-old in the wheelchair had grown into a young leader who commanded respect from world leaders while never losing his compassion for other children facing similar struggles. However, Kemi's voice grew serious. Our work is not finished. Just last month, we identified 3 new criminal organizations attempting to target families in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. The methods have evolved, but the goal remains the same: steal African resources through the manipulation and betrayal of African families. He paused, his eyes finding mine in the audience. My mama taught me that healing from betrayal isn't about getting revenge. It's about making sure the same pain doesn't happen to others. That's why the Kemi Foundation now operates in 37 countries, not to make us famous, but to make exploitation impossible. After his speech, as delegates lined up to congratulate him and discuss implementation of the protocols in their countries, I found a quiet moment with my son in the gardens. "I'm so proud of you, baby," I said, adjusting the collar of his formal Adebayo. "But I have to ask, do you ever regret giving up a normal teenage life for all this responsibility?" Kemi smiled, and for a moment I could see the little boy who'd forgiven his father and faced down criminals with courage beyond his years. "Mama, what's normal about being the heir to 50 billion naira worth of oil? My life was never going to be normal. At least this way, it means something." "And your father? How do you feel about him now?" "I feel like he's finally the man great-grandmother always hoped he could become. It just took him almost losing everything to figure out how to get there." As if summoned by our conversation, Adebayo approached us with news that would determine our family's future once and for all. "Folake, Kemi, I need to tell you both something," he said, his expression serious but not fearful. "The International Criminal Court has officially closed all investigations related to the exploitation syndicate. Victoria Emeka and her associates have been sentenced to life in prison, and their assets have been returned to the families they tried to rob. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. It's really over? The legal cases are over. But more importantly, the systemic changes you both fought for have made it almost impossible for similar crimes to succeed. The protocols Kemi developed have become international law. Kemi wheeled his chair closer to his father. Papa, what will you do now? The foundation will always need you, but you've earned the right to choose your own path. Adebayo knelt beside his son's wheelchair, just as he had 3 years earlier when asking for forgiveness. If you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure other fathers never make the mistakes I made. Dr. Hassan has offered me a position training law enforcement officers to recognize family exploitation schemes before they succeed. What do you think, Mama? Kemi asked, turning to me with the same trusting expression he'd worn as a frightened 10-year-old. I looked at this man who had once planned to throw us out on Christmas Eve for his mistress, who had called our son a burden, who had conspired with criminals to steal our birthright. Then I looked at the man he'd become, someone who had spent 3 years proving that people could change, who had dedicated his freedom to protecting other families from his own mistakes. I think, I said carefully, that redemption isn't just about saying sorry. It's about spending your life making sure the harm you caused never happens again. If that's really what you want to do, Bayo, then yes. Our son deserves to have a father he can be proud of. Adebayo's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Folake, for giving me the chance to earn that pride. But the most beautiful moment came when Kemi reached out and took both of our hands, connecting the three of us in a circle that had once been broken by betrayal and was now healed by forgiveness. We're not the same family we used to be, he said thoughtfully. We're better. We're stronger. And we know how to protect what matters. That evening, as we prepared to fly back to Lagos, I received one final message, but this one brought closure instead of fear. It was from Ambassador Adebayo, Kemi's great-aunt who had helped save us during the standoff with Victoria. Folake, I wanted you to know that the Chinese government has formally apologized for the actions of the criminal syndicate that operated in our name. As reparations, we're establishing a fund to support African families in protecting their resource rights. The fund will be administered by the Kemi Foundation, and it will ensure that what happened to your family never happens to others. I showed the message to Kemi, who read it with the same calm wisdom he'd shown throughout our entire ordeal. So we really won, he said simply. Not just for us, but for everyone. Yes, baby. We really won. As our plane lifted off from New York, carrying us home to Nigeria where oil derricks now pumped wealth directly into community development programs, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. It had started with the most devastating betrayal imaginable, a husband who chose his mistress over his disabled son, criminals who saw my child as an obstacle to their greed, a system designed to steal from the most vulnerable families. But it had ended with something beautiful. A son who had transformed personal pain into global change, a father who had learned that redemption was possible through service to others, and a family that had discovered love was stronger than betrayal when protected by wisdom and community. Kemi was asleep in his seat beside me, his head resting against the window as he dreamed of whatever new projects he was planning to help African children. At 15, he was already being consulted by governments, courted by universities, and respected by world leaders. But more importantly, he was still the kind-hearted boy who worried about other kids having enough to eat and safe places to sleep. The oil reserves that had nearly destroyed our family had instead become the foundation for protecting thousands of other families. The betrayal that should have left us broken had instead made us unbreakable. And the son that Adebayo had once called a burden had become the most powerful advocate for children's rights on the African continent. As Lagos's lights appeared below us, welcoming us home, I thought about the question Kemi had asked me years ago. How will I know who really loves me? Now I knew the answer I should have given him then, the same way our family learned to love each other again after the worst betrayal imaginable. Real love isn't about never facing challenges, it's about choosing to grow stronger together when challenges come. Our story had started with a Christmas Eve betrayal that nearly destroyed us. It was ending with a family that had learned to turn pain into purpose, trauma into triumph, and betrayal into the foundation for protecting others. Some cycles are meant to be broken. Some families are meant to be healed. And some children are meant to change the world, one protected inheritance at a time. The boy they tried to call a burden had become Nigeria's greatest gift to the next generation. And that, I realized as we touched down in Lagos, was the most powerful revenge of all, not destroying those who had hurt us, but becoming so much more than they had ever imagined possible. The end. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey of betrayal, resilience, and redemption. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Folktales by Bright for more powerful African stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of forgiveness and family strength. Comment below and let us know, what would you have done in Folake's situation? And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of triumph over adversity.